What's up, guys? It's Dave here at the Blind Spot. Happy to have some special guests here. All three of them I consider my good friends and either have been in the industry or part of the industry that I'm in. If you don't know, I'm part of the limo industry. So I'm just going around and say hello to everybody. Tamekius, what's up, my man? I think you could hear me. I don't know if you could hear me. There you go. What's up, Eddie?
Howdy.
And then there's Mike Fridge. What's up, dude?
Hey, what's up, guys?
So decided to have this little round table on a topic that is probably a hard one to conversate, but being that we're all friends and we're all adults, I thought it would be a really cool thing to do. Unless your head is buried in the sand, the country right now is going through a lot of things, and the world is, not just the country. And beginning of March all the way till probably about 7-8 days ago, we were dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic that caused so many issues to small businesses all the way to the large businesses, and I've been struggling since then. And about a week ago, an unfortunate incident happened where a young man's life was taken unjustly. We all can agree to that. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so what it's done is caused a lot of questions, and some really good questions about how law enforcement handles their situations, training, how the public needs to be a part of some of these processes, and that kind of stuff. But what it's also brought up is the racial inequality or divide, if you want to say, between the Black community, the brown community, the yellow community, the white community, everybody. And I'm trying to avoid the stigmatism that it's one of those things where not everybody is affected. I think everybody here sitting in this table, and I think we lost Tamekius for a little bit, but he'll bounce back on. I think it's an important conversation we all need to have. And if we can, as friends, talk about it and through our own experiences, I think it would be an interesting point of view. So, Eddie, because you are, probably one of the most engaged in, immigration, I think you should start, if you don't mind. If you could give you a little bit of a background, talk about yourself, and then talk about what you've been doing and what you've been through your life.
Sure. So Eddie Monroy, currently right now, the president of a regional Hispanic chamber in New York, upstate New York, about an hour north of New York City. The county is Westchester County. Most recently, there'll be an announcement later today. I've been asked to join the task force to help reopen Westchester County with the county executive. So huge honor, and again, representing the primarily the small businesses and Hispanic community in our area. I've had a major victory personally in my life and my family's life this year, the beginning of 2020, right before COVID really hit its full effect, as we're all grappling with the situation ongoing. My family, both my mother and my father immigrated from Honduras, Central America, to the United States back in the late 80s. And they didn't know each other. They met up in a small city called Newburgh, New York, back in the very early 90s. And traditional love story. My dad picks my mom up from the airport. They fall in love and they get married. And here you go. I'm born. And then there's me. You fast forward to 2020, and since my parents have immigrated as refugees into the country, they have been under an immigrant status called TPS, which stands for Temporary Protected Status. And typically, before TPS came to law, passed bipartisan in 1990, there's really only two forms of immigration that would come through. And that's either your legal or your undocumented. And what I like to say is that with the formation of TPS, it formed essentially a bridge program, which is a gray area and really puts people living in limbo for a while. I essentially describe TPS as a permanent residency, which people are familiar with as a green card. A green card allows you to have a social security number, allows you to have work authorization, allows you to travel, but it does not allow you the right to vote. And what TPS is, I call it green card light. You do all the above except for travel. You cannot travel outside the United States and come back in. The only way you can do that is with a special permission through a federal judge, asking for what's called an advance parole. So you're essentially notifying immigration that you will be leaving the country and that you will be returning and that you hope you're allowed entrance back in. But it's at the discretion of the immigration officer at port of entry, as well as the federal judge granting you that permission. So it's not guaranteed that you're allowed back into the country. So since the 90s, my parents have been under this program called TPS. And when TPS was first initiated as law, it was basically a placeholder for future immigration legislation to come down the pike. And that future never essentially came through. So you have Congress saying, we're going to grant permission temporarily to these select individuals with the hope that Congress will one day down the line come back and approach it with a more permanent solution. It's 2020, hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
And earlier this year, through extensive years of research, having to find a solution for my parents, who my dad has been a small business owner. My mom has worked with a public corporation her entire career. As a family, we've always had private health care. They're homeowners. Through their achievements, I'm living the American dream. And we had to figure out a way to keep them permanently here in the United States. And for those that don't know, back in 2017, under the current administration in the White House, the administration had decided to cancel TPS across the board. So typically there's around 485,000 members that participate in TPS with a renewal that is not automatic. So an individual has to renew every 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months. Think about it like a driver's license. You have to renew every X amount of years, right, just to continue to keep your status and your rights. So the administration had decided to cancel the program, and I had to figure out how to keep my parents here through looking at various different formats, calling on groups, immigration groups across the country, calling on attorneys. Nobody would really touch this topic, very sensitive topic, because there is no pathway to what's called legalization. So once you're in this program, you're not essentially allowed to go into a pathway for a green card, and ultimately leads to citizenship. So earlier this spring, March 12th, my parents, who are residents of Los Angeles, were finally granted, after 30 plus years, permanent residency in the United States.
That's awesome, dude. That's such a great story. And obviously we know you really well. We've kind of followed you, for the last couple of years, and all the work you did. And I bet your parents are proud. And for some of you guys do or don't know, unfortunately, you lost your sister a year ago or plus. I think that she's watching and just smiling because no matter where you are, who you are, when good people who are law-abiding and do everything the right way get the good result, then then it's that moment where you're like, I'm a proud American. I'm proud to say, fuck yeah, they deserve it. And we don't. I don't know if I want to go too much into politics, but the truth is that your parents did everything right to deserve what they got. So, congratulations to that, Eddie.
Yeah, congratulations.
So, Tamekius, you're back on. I'm happy to have you back on. I know you had some technical difficulties while you're in the car, but thanks for being on here. Give us a little bit of background. Talk to us about where you're from, where you're raised, kind of in retrospect to the current climate. Well, I think he muted himself. There he goes. You're on mute. Now go ahead. Having a hard time hearing you. Yeah, I think it's going to be a little hard having the recording like this.
Go to Mike.
You're what?
Go to Mike. Let me pull over for a second.
Okay. Yeah. So
Go to Fred.
well, this is the Dave special. We do everything without editing, so I don't really give a shit if somebody likes it or not. It's one of those things that I wanted some good people on here, and I probably should have texted Tamekius 30 minutes earlier. Make sure you're at your office or at home, but he's a busy man. So hey, let's while Tamekius tries to find a spot to stop. Mike, how about you give a little bit of background about yourself and where you grew up and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so my name's Mike Fridge. I grew up in the suburbs of New Orleans. Really, it's hard to follow up Eddie. I mean, he has obviously a much more interesting story than I'm going to have. But what I can say is, I come from immigrants as well. My grandmother on my dad's side was Lebanese. Her parents actually came from Lebanon. Both of them came from Lebanon, went to New York, found their way down into New Orleans. And my grandfather on my dad's side and my grandmother on my dad's side both grew up in the Ninth Ward, and they would take a streetcar from the Ninth Ward down into the French Quarter where they went to church, and that's where they met. And then from there, they when they married, they moved to Gentilly, which is another suburb. It's not really a suburb, but it's in New Orleans. It's another neighborhood, and so that's where my parents were born, or my dad was raised in Gentilly, the Gentilly neighborhood of New Orleans. And then when my parents got married, we moved to the North Shore, which is it's across the lake. And I've been working in the hospitality industry for 16 years, which is interesting is because even though my grandparents grew up in the Ninth Ward, and they're really New Orleanians in such a cool way. And so my mom's side, they have Cajun in their blood. I mean, it's just such a really cool thing. I never really spent any time in New Orleans. I didn't really know a lot about it. Never went down there on a regular basis like my cousins did. And so when I got into hospitality, it was, basically my office became the French Quarter. So I worked in the French Quarter for the last 16 years, running a company that did swamp tours, city tours, ghost tours in the French Quarter. I had the really, really neat experience of managing people that live in the French Quarter as a really eclectic group of people. So it's extremely different than what I grew up, where I grew up on the North Shore, the suburb. We didn't have this eclectic artistic group of people. So for the last 16 years, I've really embraced kind of the history that my family has. And I've been married for the last 10 years. I got 4 kids, and that's kind of like I said, not as interesting as Eddie's. Mm-hmm. My city is more interesting than I am. So.
Yeah, well, that's understandable. But one of the reasons I asked you to be on here is because you do live in the South, and I don't understand kind of the mentality of Southern people in the sense of, and I should say this, in the sense of when it comes to racism in that context. There are a lot of great people in the South, a lot, but racism does still exist in the South, and it's something that's when we had these conversations in our group text, you made a really strong comment to me about hate in your heart. And not you specifically, but in general, people having.
Yeah, let's clarify that.
Yeah, I want to clarify. He doesn't have any hate in his heart. But the point is that about having that kind of thing that's instilled in you from when you were born and you're raised that way, and then it's just there, and it's not something that could just suddenly go away. But we'll hit that topic. Tamekius, I think, is parked somewhere.
Well, let me just say something real quick. Even though I grew up in the South, New Orleans is considered this island, this blue island in a Red Sea. New Orleans is extremely different. So I've had the good fortune of growing up 30 minutes from New Orleans and working in it for the last 16 years, which is, and I mean, it is more like a West Coast city in the way they think and the behavior. But then again, I grew up also 30 minutes from Mississippi, which is your typical Southern. So it was really, so I've got to see both worlds. But yeah, New Orleans, even though we're in the South, it's hard to say that everybody people that grow up in New Orleans and live in New Orleans aren't exactly Southern. So
okay, well, that's good clarification, and that's my own not knowing geographical places within the where New Orleans.
It's just a fun fact about New Orleans. That's
it's good to know. But Tamekius, thanks for coming back to us, and so we love having you here. So give us a little bit of background, talk about your history, talk about past. I mean, we've had these great conversations through our group text message, and you made some statements and things that really intrigued me to do this call. So give us a little bit of background.
All right, Tamekius Breland. I'm certified chauffeur transportation in Charlotte, North Carolina. I grew up as a military brat. Pretty much my elementary years, 2nd through 5th grade, I actually grew up in Germany.
Hey, Tamekius, we're having a hard time hearing you. So
can you hear me now?
Take off your earpiece and just try to do it on your phone only.
How about now?
A lot better.
A lot better? All right, good. All right, so once again, let me start over again. Tamekius Breland, born and raised, well, actually born in Charleston, South Carolina. Grew up a military brat. Spent my elementary years, 2nd through 5th grade in Germany. Came back to the States right before my 6th grade year. Spent the most of the time between Tennessee and Atlanta. After that, kind of went to college, played football, that type of ordeal. For the most part, I'm a Southern boy. Always been a Southern boy. Spent 7 years in Minnesota, a couple years in Cincinnati, Atlanta. Tried to travel a little bit. Stayed in California for a little while, LA for about 9 months.
It's a long time.
It is a long time, but it's kind of I've been going back and forth to LA for about 4 years now, so I think I'm SoCal, but still remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But not a whole lot going on there. But just as a whole, with everything that's going on with COVID and George Floyd and all of that kind of stuff. Being in Minnesota for the 7 years that I was there, the Black population in Minnesota is not very big. So the majority of Black folks, if you stay there long enough, you start to know almost everybody, because every Black event, you see the same faces over and over again. So it's a very small population that's there. So when something like that happens, and even going back to Philander a couple years ago, with police shooting him in the car with his girl and his daughter in the back seat. I mean, that type of stuff. It's like, as a Black man in America, it's a reality that a lot of people don't know if you're not a Black male. And me having to have those comments about what to do when you're confronted with the police officer, even if you do everything right, you still may not go home. And mom today calls me just to make sure that if I'm out, who am I with and where I'm at, just in case something happens, she knows exactly what's going on. And I mean, that's a step and above. My wife's doing the same thing. And, now that my daughter's a little older, now she even sends me text, hey, Dad, you okay? And it's like, it's one of those things where I kind of took it for granted growing up and even now a little bit. But year after year, things start to happen. It's like, now I kind of appreciate, checking up on me just to making sure that, nothing's going on. I'm actually still safe. Nothing's really happening. But I guess for me, it's a little unique as, I'm a 6'2", 240-pound guy. So a lot of people kind of put me in that category of he must be a celebrity. It's kind of funny. It's kind of funny and stereotypical at the same thing.
It's the Jeep.
This morning, I go to the bank. I'm getting out my car, and this white older lady gets out her car. And she got a little dog in her hand, whatever. And as I'm getting out of the car, walking towards the bank, she's kind of looking at me. She's doing it like 3 or 4 times. And I just say, hey, how you doing? And she started talking. And before we get to the bank, she was like, you're probably famous, and I don't even know. I said, maybe. You might want to Google a picture or something, right? And she's like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could be. I don't know. I mean, but it's kind of one of those things that, yeah, it's kind of I say it's a good stereotype because you don't see me as a thug or, some kind of, riffraff, but not every black guy is an athlete or a rapper or something like that. So it's those little things like that. It's like, some people might say, oh, well, that's nothing. Well, that's kind of the little racial bias that you don't understand. That, it happens and you blow it off, but it's like, you know what? It could very easily be another person just like her that says, you know what? I don't feel comfortable with him. Like, simple, the man just asked her to put a leash on your dog. All of a sudden she's all, well, I'm gonna call the police and say that you're an angry black man and I feel threatened. And the fact that some white people in the world feel that you can do that is a part that's very frustrating. So there's a lot that I could spend probably 3 or 4 hours just talking about all the different things, being a black man in the world. But I don't want to get off on a tangent. But I guess as far as everything that's going on with George Floyd and kind of seeing the unrest around the country, I'm happy to see that finally people are starting to realize that this can't continue. But on the other hand, I'm like, I wish that there was a better way to do it. But obviously, the only way people listen is when people tear stuff up. So now that they're tearing things up, now you're listening and now you're paying attention and trying to figure out, well, why are you so angry? Well, we've been mad for a long time. And we tried to do it peaceful for a time. And you just didn't want to hear it. Colin Kaepernick was banned from the NFL for taking a stance on this very same issue. Yeah, but it was about the flag and about the damn flag. All right? My mother is a veteran. Yeah, a lot of people in my family are veterans. All right. It's never about the damn flag. It's about the social injustice of black people in this country not having a fair shake at life. And yeah, we might have a few celebrities and philanthropists that are doing very well in the country, and everybody wants to bring up Oprah and Obama, and those are great, but they're a small percentage of the bigger picture.
Right.
Everybody's not going to be an Obama. Everybody's not going to be an Oprah. I'm sorry.
Right.
Everybody's not going to make $100 million, $1 billion. It's just not going to happen. All right. But for the ones that are just trying to get a job, pay the bills, take care of their family, we shouldn't have to worry about going outside, being stopped by the cop and not making it home that night.
Right.
It's just, it's something that should never happen. And I'm not saying that, as a country, we have a problem. And until the country realizes that, Black lives really don't matter as much as they want to say it does. And the shit that really pisses me off is when people say Black lives matter. Well, all lives matter. Well, until Black lives matter, all lives don't matter. Point blank. Until my life as a black man matters, all lives don't matter.
And I agree with you. And I think that it's something that I would probably say, when Colin Kaepernick did, the whole kneeling down, I was frustrated because I was frustrated not because of what he was symbolizing, is where he did it and what he could have done, I think, differently. And this is just me being me. And a little bit of history about me. My parents are immigrants. They came from Israel with $500 in their pocket. They were not treated the greatest when they first got here. My dad was a taxi cab driver, and my uncle, fortunately, he was already here, so they helped. They obviously helped my parents get stable here, and that from that point on, we've had a good life. I mean, I'm not, I can't sit here and say that I understand anybody's struggle. In 2004, I decided to become a police officer, solely because I felt like I could make a change, and I had the personality that could actually make change, not specifically in the police department, but more of community policing. And I think that's a topic that I want to hit on a little bit later. But, I think what is important out of all of this is that, for me at least, when, the whole hashtag Black Lives Matter, I was in a place where I was like, well, all lives matter and everybody should matter. But when you really go down into it, you really have to think that if you want all lives to matter, every single person you're putting under that category needs to feel like they matter. Whether you're Black, Hispanic, Asian, Middle Eastern. I mean, shit, since 9/11, there's been so many attacks on Middle Eastern people just because of their nationality, that they wear, their attire that they need to wear. Sorry, I don't remember all the names, so I don't want to, discredit what they're called. But it's been happening for years. And, I think that you made a comment, Tamekius, said you feel that America is a racist country. And I'm going to give you a chance to speak, but I'm going to just put my opinion. I don't think America in a whole is a racist country. I think there are a lot of people still in this country that have had racism in their lives that are like deep rooted. But I don't want to be categorized as an American that lives in a racist America. You know what I mean? That's hard for me to see because I'm not. I don't have any racial, and don't get me wrong, I've driven down the road and got mad at somebody for driving the wrong, slower, and then you see who's driving, you're like, you make a comment, you're like, okay, well, that's not really needed. So yes, there are some racial tendencies that we all have as human beings, but we're not talking about that stuff. We're talking about people who are losing their lives unjustly. And it's not just by law enforcement. And I think that's why I wanted to have this conversation. Is I want to talk about also the unjust killing of each of our own group of culture. In Israel, Jews are killing Jews. Jews are killing Arabs. Here, we have Black community killing each other, the Hispanic, the white community. I mean, everybody. Like, at what point are we all going to find a way to have all these kind of conversations all together at the same time? Because I think it's really important. And I don't know if you guys disagree, but I'll let everybody chime in. Do you think it's important that we talk about not just, law enforcement needs to make a change? I made a comment to a friend yesterday that if law enforcement was treated like a business rather than a fraternity, it would do its job correctly. And not every police department's bad. Not every police officer. I know a shit ton. So chime in. Let's hear it.
Honestly, I think it's just part of a grander problem, a very systemic problem from all categories. You look at it both from a law perspective and then from a social perspective. I think as Americans, we do a really good job talking because of the First Amendment right. We have freedom of free speech, but we do a dismal job listening. And we just don't listen to communities as actively and as important as it is to speak as we can. It's really a shame. And there's often enough, not until truly we're in this age of we're seeing what's happening with George Floyd, we're seeing what's happening with Eric Gardner, right? It's social media coming to the forefront. and its body cams also showing these footages of what's happening. This has always happened, and it continues to happen. And unfortunately, it's just now truly having a limelight to these effects.
T.
I mean, it's as a country, the country was pretty much built on racism. I mean, you go to Africa and you put us all on a boat and you ship us over here, and then you enslave hundreds of years. And just when we thought that things were getting better, here comes the same stuff that was happening in the '60s are now happening all over again, and all of it goes back to the damn police. They're supposed to protect and serve everyone, not just the few. And hey, I got a lot of cops that are friends, a lot of guys that I went to school with that are now police officers. And I mean, we have the same conversation. I tell them the same thing. You may be a good cop, but unless you telling on the bad cops or internally, y'all are having those conversations. There's no way that you can have one white cop have 18 different violations against people of color and you don't see a pattern.
Yeah.
He should never be a cop at point, and that's where the issue lies of, yes, there are a lot of good cops in this world. I have cops in my family, but at the end of the day, cops have to police cops. Just like y'all want to come around to different neighborhoods, and I'm not saying y'all as y'all, but just as cops going around a different neighborhood, oh, well, you should snitch on so-and-so. Well, if you expect the community to snitch on each other, then I expect the cops to snitch on each other, all right? Because if you got bad cops and you got good cops, the good cops to be saying, hey, look, you making us all look bad. You making us all look bad. So I'm going to need you to get your life right or find another profession, all right? And until they get to that point, the police system is going to stay corrupt. Because I think everybody knows also you got DEA agents that, they may take the drugs, but those drugs somehow find their way back on the streets. They may take the money, but that money somehow finds its way in their pocket at their house buying lavish gifts, right? That's a whole nother issue, but it still goes back to America as a whole is racist. Like it or not, is racist. And it's not that all of a sudden, is super racist now. It's just that a lot of it is being videotaped. So a lot of it now, a lot of people are just getting to see that. Oh wow, that's really messed up. It's not isolated incidents. It's just a few here and there that actually make it to the news. That people are like, oh man, that's really bad.
Right.
Well, that's only a little bit, man. If you really want to get into how bad it really is, it would take years and decades for all the issues to really be panned out. But until white America says, you know what, this racism stuff really has to stop, and we need to stand up and say, look, I respect my black brothers, I respect my Asian, my Latino, my Muslim brothers, that if you're going to be racist to them, I got a problem with you. And if you continue to do it, not only am I not going to associate with you, I'm going to call you out. Because that's the only way that we're going to get better. I mean, you're Jewish, right?
Yep.
Dave?
Yeah.
So you already know there's a lot of people in the world that don't like Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things going on that people say about Jewish people that it's not flattering. You don't like it, but it happens. And those are things that shouldn't happen, but it happens. There's a hatred towards some Jews, and maybe I shouldn't say Jews,
It's okay.
Jewish.
Okay.
So I mean, there's some things that don't pan out well in America. If you're not a supposed, all white American, then you don't belong here, right? I'm sorry, but didn't you steal the lands from the Indians? I'm sorry. Didn't you bring over black people on the ship? I'm sorry. White America kind of created a problem, and now you're mad that we're here. And it almost kind of goes back to something my grandmother said, that white people act like black people all of a sudden going to get mad at being hated upon, and all of a sudden rebel and start killing white people and start treating them how they used to treat us back in the day. And at the time, I was like, what? That makes absolutely no sense. But if you think about it, what if black people started to treat white people how they treat us? Or what if all black males 18 to 30 go out and get a gun license? I guarantee you there'll be some goddamn gun control immediately.
So do you think,
there's so much that I can kind of get into.
No, of course.
Well, hey, look, I'd like to. There's a lot to unpack in what Tamekius had to say. A lot. I mean, there's a lot. Yeah. And for me, I mean, I think it's important that I'm listening. But there's a few things that, and again, I'm not trying to change anybody's mind, but I'd like to at least share my thought process and then try to have somebody at least tell me where it's wrong at. Look, you and I, the only thing I said on that message was I don't think America was built on racism. Less than 1.5% of Americans own slaves. Now, the flip side of that is everybody else didn't have a problem with it. So only 1.5% of Americans during the time of slavery actually owned slaves. But you can make the argument, well, hey, the other 98.5 didn't step up and say anything. As far as, I would never even bring this up, but the fact that being built on racism, I can't really see that. Was it wrong? Absolutely. I don't really know anybody that would argue that it was right. But we're not a perfect country. We're not. I'm not a perfect person. None of us are. Because we fall short doesn't make us what?
I think you're a small percentage.
Well, and like I said, there's a lot to unpack, and look,
of America that is actually.
Let me ask you this.
Right?
Let me ask you this.
There's not a lot of people that look like you that think the same way that you do.
Well, look, you say, hey, people went to. The other thing is, almost every European country had slaves as well. Jewish people were in slavery. Irish people were enslaved at some point. There's all these different levels of. I mean, every country in the world has had slavery in its country, on its continent, and Africa is really no exception. In fact, and again, I'm only telling you what I understood, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I'd like somebody to correct me. But the thought of Europeans or Americans showing up in boats and kidnapping Africans and putting them on the boat, I was taught that they went there and different tribes enslaved other tribes and sold the enslaved other tribes to the European boats or the American boats. So, I mean, is Africa built on racism as well? I'm not trying to be condescending. I'm really asking, is that an asinine thought process that I have?
I mean, I don't know the answer to that. And I think that it's a great conversation, a great question.
Yeah, it is. And the only reason that it is because in America, and that's the only place that, I can't speak for what their thought process was back then, how they thought it was, and still now today that there's still slavery in most countries. It ain't right. It's never been right. And I don't know that in most countries it's ever going to change. At least in America, slavery did come to an end.
Right.
Now it's a different type of slavery. Okay. For the white Americans that truly, truly in their heart don't see color, don't have hatred, they're a small percentage of them, but those are the ones that, as African Americans, we need those people to stand up more and say, you know what? The shit ain't right. We need y'all to say, hey, it's not right, because black people can stand up all day and say, it's racism in the country, but all anybody's gonna say is, every black person thinks there's racism. No, every black person doesn't think there's racism. It's just somehow or another, it keeps happening.
Right.
And there's always instances where things keep happening and make you say, you know what? Obviously, nobody respects blacks in this country. For whatever reason, they don't. And being from the South is probably the worst racism.
You're absolutely right.
In this country.
There was a time that Italians were treated as second class citizens. Irish were considered to be worth less than African Americans. I mean, that's a fact. The issue is there is no law that is ever going to get passed that's going to eliminate racism. It just isn't going to happen. It's a heart issue. And that's what a conversation that Dave and I had. It's truly a heart issue. And we live in a society. And look, I don't think there's anything wrong with necessarily seeing color. Okay. I can appreciate different cultures. I can appreciate it. And there's color with different cultures. I mean, look, I personally I'm a Christian and I'm a man of faith. So I'll just kind of word it like this. I can appreciate the Southern Black churches that we have. I really can. Do I go to them? No, not because I don't like the Black people that go there. It's because it's just not my style of worship or preaching and things like that. In the same sense, if I was to ask one of my friends that go to those churches to come to my church, they would probably go nuts. They would think it was boring. They would probably not enjoy it because it's not as lively and as entertaining as they're, and that's a cultural thing. And there's really nothing wrong with that until our heart has hate. I mean, I think it's crazy that there are people out there that can form hate. And most of the time, and look, I have family members where I have this discussion, but I can tell you, I got a huge family that stretches from Florida to Texas, all the way up to Baltimore. And it is, out of that massive family, there's like one or two. And, it's always the older generation. It's the older generation, and it doesn't make it right. But we're trying to, as the younger generation, we are trying to explain to them, like, man, can you explain to us that thought process? Because, God, it seems really stupid. And so we are speaking out in our families, in our neighbors. We don't have friends that behave that way. I mean, that's the majority of the people. And again, I grew up in New Orleans, so I don't think New Orleans is a typical Southern city. It's not deep Alabama or Mississippi, but culturally, I think we have to understand that there's a difference between having hate in our heart and not exactly, I don't know, for lack of a better word, appreciating a culture. Is that fair?
But part of this topic of culture, right, being such a diverse nation that we are, I think there is a huge injustice when it comes to education.
There you go.
Something that I read a few months back when I was doing some research related to MWBE work, which stands for Minority Women Business Enterprises. The fact that you can get a certain textbook from a publisher in New York City and have a certain curriculum geared towards X, Y, and Z, related a history lesson. Let's put that as a topic, and then have a different type of chapter of a history lesson in a rural city like in Texas. That's a problem. That's an issue. What you're essentially saying is you can teach this type of culture here, and you can teach this type of culture over here. That's injustice right there on the education system.
I agree with that. Absolutely.
I 100% agree with that. And I think that it brings up, Eddie, a really good point, that so like growing up, my parents were not racist that I knew of. Actually, let me rephrase that. My mom 100% wasn't racist. My dad had a tendency to be more racial to certain classes of Arabs that he felt didn't accept the fact that he was an Israeli Jew. Because, obviously in Israel, there's a lot of the Palestinians. But another point that was brought up is I think it really does start with our generation. And that's why I want to sit here and talk, because our generation, whether we agree with, protesters versus looters versus, whatever you want to call everybody else, the fact is having a protest where you're getting your word out and you look at the protesters and it's a diverse group. That's a start that hasn't happened in a long time. Because
I guess. Wait. I agree with protesting. I think it's if you want to talk about what we're rooted in America, it's protesting. It's for fighting for what we believe in. I don't believe in rioting, But what I want to know is, man, in New Orleans, and I don't know if you guys have heard, if you guys have these incidences in your neighborhoods or you hear them on your news, it seems like at least 3 or 4 times a year, an innocent child, an innocent woman. How about the woman that was gunned down in her home by the police officer? She was doing nothing. It was a bad cop. He didn't purposely kill her because she was black, but it was a black woman in her home, and he shot in the window. Where's the protest because of that? Where's the protest because of the young girl that's at her grandma's house and gets hit by a stray bullet, or the young boy that's walking to school that's 7 years old and some guy runs him over and doesn't stop? Where are the protests because with kids and people that are literally doing nothing wrong? They're doing nothing wrong.
The wrong place, wrong time.
It happens all the time. But we're going to protest and riot when, God, there's a lot of other, I'm not justifying the death. I agree. It's wrong. It shouldn't have happened. I believe that protests should happen. But man, where's the protest with all these other things? Where's the protest where there's, in my opinion, that's true injustice. When you talk about, Dave, you talked about neighborhood over and over again. And I got to drive through I got to drive through the 9th floor all the time, which is a predominantly African-American neighborhood. And that's in these neighborhoods, where are the protests when there's being injustice every single day versus the cop that happens? I don't know. I don't know how often it happens. Statistically, it doesn't happen. I'm not trying to be insensitive, but it's statistically, you have innocent children that are dying in their neighborhood a lot more often than you are a situation like we're dealing with.
So what?
That's just my perspective. If I'm wrong, I'm not here to be on a soapbox.
No, I think you make a good point.
So
go ahead, T.
Yeah.
So let me just talk a little bit about, these instances of the kids being killed and whatever gang members or whatever, who's ever in the neighborhood doing dumb shit. All right. There are always in the Black community against gang violence, against stupidity killing kids is always just a street code. You don't kill kids. All right. That's just a street code. I don't care what color you are. You don't kill kids. Nobody ever wants to see a child die. All right. But in the Black community, we have our own way of protesting and trying to speak on it. And even if we do go to the media, white America don't give a shit about another little Black kid dying or another Black man down in the street. They give 2 fucks, And for the ones that do you go down to the 9th ward? Do you live in the 9th ward? Do you worship in the 9th ward? No, you don't. And for whatever reason, I probably say it's probably good for you that you don't. All right.
Actually, I do. I do all those things.
See Black people in their neighborhoods.
Well, I think it's interesting you brought up the media.
But you're a small percentage. You're a very small percentage of people that want to do better, that want to see people for who they are, not the color of their skin and none of that. You really want to see them as they've got a good heart. I want to deal with them. And that's what I like about you. That's what I first learned about you from the rip. You're just a genuinely good guy. And trust me, there's not a lot of good people. I don't care what color they are in this world. But we need more people like that, right?
I agree.
Back to the situation at hand about the protesting in the Black communities. There's always a protest in the Black communities.
I want to also, I agree with Tamekius. There is a small percentage. People move out of the city. They move out, instead of trying to fight for change, they move out of their neighborhood. They move out of their city. And then they live over. And look, I want to say that was really eye-opening for me, is where I grew up, where I live on the North Shore, it's majority white. And most people sit there and they talk about New Orleans like, well, it's just crime ridden. It's this, it's that. And they just talk bad about it, but they're not doing anything to change. Look, what was pregnancy rate out of wedlock was through the roof in the Black community. Well, I can tell you firsthand that not a single white person wanted to say anything about it. They didn't want to address it, whether it would be in church, whether it be political office. They didn't want to talk about it. Well, guess what? Now it's exploding in the white community. Now we got to have change. So I agree with that. There is an issue that we have a society where we live in our little bubble, and we don't want to get outside of the bubble, and we don't want to change the bubble. But I can tell you, I really do believe when it comes to racism, and it's a hard issue. And I shared this in Chicago, and Tamekius, you weren't in the group at the time, but I'll just share it. I didn't grow up with a racist dad. My father was not a racist. My parents got divorced, and I think through divorce, I ended up dealing with some anger issues. And maybe growing up in the South, it was easy for me just to for whatever reason, I think it was just pure ignorance. I mean, here I am, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and I can tell you, I had a heart issue, and I made comments, and I would jump on the bandwagon when I'd hear older people say, again, not my dad, but when I'd hear older people say things. And I remember, and look, I believe truly that God had put people in my life. I mean, I ended up, like, I got Mexican cousins. I would go to the store, or I'd end up interact with a African-American officer. But it wasn't until I ended up start going to church, and I had a black youth pastor, a Spanish youth pastor, and man, I accepted Christ. And I can truly tell you, my heart was completely radically changed. And then when I started working in New Orleans, and I saw the really, in my mind, injustice that was being done, children raising children, poor educational system, poor infrastructure, I knew I wanted to do something more than just live in the suburbs and act like everything's going to be fine, and that it's never going to bleed over into other communities. So I just want to go back. It's truly a hard issue, and there's no law that's ever going to change somebody's heart, and there's no riot or protest, even, unfortunately, that's ever going to change the heart of people. It's got to be something internal.
Eddie, you were going to say something.
Do you not think that America has a problem with racism?
Was that a question for Mike?
Is that a question for me?
That's for everybody.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking to Mike. I guess so.
Yes, we 100% have a problem with
America
racism.
has a problem.
Oh yeah, no, there's no question.
Again,
Yeah.
specifically.
No, I'm just saying there's no question.
African Americans.
Do I think it's only to African Americans? Is that? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, I don't think it is. I think there's blacks that have racism toward whites. I think there's whites that have racism. I guess just in my group, my circle of friends, I don't know any. I mean, I know family members that we don't associate with, but I just don't know a lot of racist people.
Yeah, I don't associate myself with anybody that's racist. To answer your question, T, I think
to say that your group may be a good part, right? And there's a piece of, you gotta expand your boundaries, and you may not have a group of friends that are. Do you even have black friends in your circle that you literally hang out with all the time?
Yeah, we do. In fact, one of the things I'm part of an organization that's in the Ninth Ward that's ran by probably, I mean, the founders are white, but the board is 50%, probably 60, 70% white, and the rest, and then probably 30, 40 are black, and it's in the Desire Street Community Center. It's a food pantry. I mean, we are very, very involved. That's what we're involved in, and our church is very diverse. I mean, really diverse. Look, I know it's there. Look, I got a family member right now. She's dating a black guy, and her dad won't talk to her. That's racism. That's an issue. And all of the family member are saying, are you literally going to lose a relationship with your daughter over hate? Is the hate greater than the love you have for your daughter? And he can't answer it. It's a hard issue for him.
Eddie, what were you going to say, man?
So, is there racism in America? Of course. You see it everywhere. It's not just in it's not just in enforcement, in law enforcement. It's across the board. When you look at certain legislations, some of the work that I've been recently doing the last few months is finding research on MWBEs. And I kid you not, there is not one national database where you can find businesses of color. I find that astonishing. There is only one office that services MWBE businesses. And guess what the staff is? 2. There's only 2 people that staff that agency. And this is a federal agency. So when you hear about we're trying to uplift the minority community, we're trying to help out, where are the resources?
So I got a question to you, if you don't mind me, Eddie. I don't mean to interrupt you on that, but it's actually a really cool talk, and I didn't even think about this. So when I started my company, or I took over the company, nothing when I applied for my new, statement of information, all that kind of, there was never a question that I can remember if I was white, Black, Hispanic. So I think it'd be really, unless we start a database and then we send it out to everybody who owns companies in this, and then says to them, hey, please, mark whatever you are. I apologize if I'm using the wrong words. It's not what I'm trying. My point is that I think 100% law enforcement has its issues, but this really starts from like the top. And I'm not saying any specific presidency or president. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about the mere fact that today in our time, there are the last 5-7 days, there have been some great conversations, some great protesting, but there's been some really bad looting and violence to all demographics. It doesn't matter what demographic you are. But you don't hear the government stand up and say, we hear you, but we're not against violence to anybody. And it's really, and I'm not a political man, Eddie. Politics is not my thing. But it's only logical to question, why isn't any of our, here in specific California, we have people saying we agree with the injustice and all that, which we all do. I think all of us agree that there's injustice. But the people that are leading this state and leading this country are not giving us solutions, are not finding solutions, are not talking about solutions. They're just agreeing, nodding their head, and then moving on. Look, the last 7 days, when was the last time I didn't hear anything about COVID-19? Yeah. I think it was the governor of Cuomo, right? He's the governor of
New York.
Prior to 7 days ago, he was yelling at everybody, stay at home, stay at home, stay at home, stay at home, shelter in place, no large gathering. Suddenly, he's supporting large gathering. Again, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, we have friends that support the administration, but in this situation, we have all said, God, he could have done a lot more to diffuse this situation. What's that, Eddie?
It's gone out of hand. You can say that you're for protesting, you're for free speech, but not to extend an open hand of saying you're an individual of compassion, we're willing to hear you.
Yep.
That message alone starts to resonate a bit. And what you're seeing is communities being divided across the country. So you have one corridor of the country where you mentioned it, Governor Cuomo, he says certain things. And then you have the other side of the West Coast where you have the governor of California, and they come out and say something. And then you have the governor of Arkansas, and they say something. And I mentioned these 3 specific governors because when you had COVID, and we're still in the midst of this pandemic, yes, granted, there are a few states that are starting to reopen up in different phases, and trying to do that strategically. But when you have a system that pins one view to another view, that right there is culture and systematic. That how do you change that? Because that we get right back to this conversation of racism. Black, white, Latino, Asian, LGBTQ+. whatever it is, you're always going to be pinned one against another.
Right. So how do we,
I agree with that. And I think that I do think that political, whether it be this president, which you guys know I support, or a governor, there needs to be more, especially during times like this, there needs to be more words that diffuse the situation, calm people down. I mean, and unfortunately, that is not a gift that this man has.
And I'm not saying that government is the answer, because
leadership.
Exactly. It's part of the solution, but it also comes from various sectors. So one of the reasons I'm trying to do as much research as I can, and coming to this task force that I've been that I'm joining on, and we're having a first meeting tomorrow, is to speak to the community of color, speak about the community of color, and speak about the communities that really have been repressed. And a big portion of this is, how do we, as you guys we're all business folks here, how do we as businesses come forward? So what leader in the business world has said, listen, I believe that a portion of our services should go directly to businesses of color? That's what part of yesterday's demonstration was about. Blackout Tuesday was about, how do you protest? How do you vote? And how do you support others? And specifically, yesterday's hashtag Blackout Tuesday was about, how do you support the community of color? How do you support it? Well, you donate to institutions that speak on their behalf, nonprofits. You invest in their goods and services. You go purchase their items. That's how you uplift. That's how we start to bring down this noise. So it doesn't just come from an elected official perspective, but also from the business community. We're going to put our dollars in the right spots. As a business owner, I vow that 20% or whatever percentage of my business or goods or services, when I go to purchase a certain good or service, that it's going to go to an area of diversity. That's how you uplift.
so can I, Tamekius, can you hear us? Okay, so I'm going to ask you, Tamekius, a question, because I think this, Eddie, what you just brought up is something that I think we should kind of dive into. And I don't want to hold you guys for 2 hours here. We'll cut this short in a bit. But Tamekius, as an African-American business owner who's built a good foundation, good company, well-respected in our industry, do you, on what Eddie just said, do you agree that a percentage of your money that you make should go back to the community?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a program or some type of foundation that you could actually give back to help out underserved or underprivileged communities. Now, for me personally, I start with my own family, because I've got my own family members that are in underserved, underprivileged areas. So by helping them out, whether it be, with rent money or, school supplies, or, kids who graduated from high school, now they're going to college, making sure that they have everything they need for college. That's my give back. And I tell people all the time, you can give back to anybody that you want to, but if you're not helping your own family, what's the point? Right. So I do for my own family first before I think about doing for anybody else's, simply because if I'm not helping my own people in my own family, who else is going to do it?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're having some technical difficulties because he's driving, but I think we got the point. I guess, bring up that topic, I think, we got.
So, hold on.
So, Eddie, what I was thinking, right when you brought up the idea, I do agree with you that money needs to be put back into the community. Let's not talk about whether it's whatever race.
Yeah.
I do believe that it has to come through taxes. The tax money that we're getting, like I don't know. I can't give you all the money breakdowns of each state and what their money goes to, but I truly do believe it doesn't go in the right places. I think it's going into places that don't need it, and it's wasted. And let's just be real. Our government officials make so much money, and really, what's that?
I said either them or their direct family member is making
right, or the plane that they bought with that money that the government gave them. One of the two. But it brings up a conversation of like, okay, so maybe we need to relook at everything. Maybe we need to look at how much money we're spending on these people that are representing us and that are not getting the job done.
But that's part of this conversation that's happening in these protests. These conversations are starting to come out. So when your tax dollars go to your local school board, you elect for individuals to be on those school boards. So you're holding these schools accountable by a civilian board. Why don't we have that? Why don't we have something similar related to that when it comes to law enforcement, a civilian board? Why don't we have something to that effect when it comes to budget making, whether that's at a local, state, or even national level, right? There's different ways on how we can approach this, but part of these injustices that are happening, the Black Lives Matter movement. Right now, we're a few days away, awaiting a decision from the Supreme Court related to DACA, which is the children that have come into the country with their parents, not knowing that they had an undocumented status. We are on the brink of a few days from now having 1.2 million individuals hold no status.
Yeah.
So how do we hold our elected officials accountable?
And that's what's really hard. I think it's a really hard. Go ahead. Sorry, bud.
No, you go ahead.
No, I again, I think we all are in agreement. And I think it doesn't matter, again, what race, what religion, what sexual preference, we all agree that things have to change. But it's really hard for all of us to be able to say what the answer is because I'm not going to lie. I'm selfish. I want to take care of myself and my family. And that in its own is being selfish. But it's not being selfish because I still have a responsibility of my family. I, in turn, look at the government officials, and we can even talk about law enforcement. Let's go to law enforcement in this, having a board to, a citizen board. I think it's kind of like this thing where, when you sell or you have a venture capital company come into your company and they give you they take a 30% stakehold, and then they want to tell you how to run your business with not knowing how the business is ran. That, I think, is where a citizen board is a big issue. I think what can happen is we should have a citizen board where they actually come out and actually experience the day-to-day and 6 months, and then start looking at the analytics. Because listen, numbers don't lie. It doesn't. Can they be construed? 100%. We know that. It happens all the time. Look at Kylie Jenner. She was considered a billionaire. Now they found out that she's not. So, anybody could make any numbers right. I bring her up because she's annoying as shit. But anyways.
I just saw that in the news the other day.
Right. So the reason I bring that up is because, okay, so let's talk about the advisory board. You get 3 people or let's just say the community has 6 different cultures: Filipinos, African Americans, Hispanics, Polynesian, any which way. Within that demographic, and I call it demographic, or that group, they elect one person. And that one person, nobody else could vote for their representation, because somebody in the African American community should be elected by somebody in the African community to represent them on that advisory board. Then you put 6, 8, 10 people. Look at Oakland. Oakland's super diverse. So you have 10 people who are there for the same exact reason. Let's make things fair. Let's get the injustice out of law enforcement. But how do you teach them what it's like to do a job as a police officer. I can tell you, I was a white police officer working in a predominantly Polynesian and African American community when I was working in my last city. I never had a problem of race. Actually, let me rephrase that. There was one time I had a problem, and that was he came back and apologized. I, again, don't know if an advisory board is going to change what each officer thinks. It's how does a law enforcement agency keep each officer accountable every day, every month, every 6 months, every year, every 2 years, every 5 years? Because I can tell you that most officers, I would hope, would come and be more inclined to want to help in the beginning. And then it turns into a thing where over time, it's like a job, any job. You start to get complacent. You start to think that everybody's the same. And then it becomes unbelievably hard to keep your head straight. And then those people change. So I think truly it becomes a place where law enforcement needs to start acknowledging the fact that officers change. And I would say, and some cop buddies of mine may agree or not agree, but I think 99% of officers have PTSD, which caused them to have a different perspective on things. I became numb.
Well, I'll interrupt just on a corporate level. Somebody was bringing up the fact that, hey, if we handled the police world or the police departments the way we did corporately, there could be some change because internally in the business world that I was in, we had over 200 employees and we had a very, very diverse group of people, but we had to do ongoing training, diversity training, sensitivity training. And at first I thought it was kind of like just a joke. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Are we really having to do this? But then as I went to the class and I went to the next class and the next class, I was like, God, I get it. I get that there could be insensitivities. Look, I used to make a joke about, I said, if my wife ends up talking back to me, I'll just have to discipline her. And I would joke, but what I didn't realize, and it didn't really occur to me until one of these sensitivity classes, is how many people was I saying that joke to who came from an abusive relationship? Maybe their parents were abusive. They saw their dad beat their mom, or maybe and man, boom, I just stopped. I was like, God, so those sensitivity classes or those ongoing training classes that teach people about the different cultures and not accepting inappropriate things, but just making you more aware that, man, there's a lot going on that your little bubble never happened. I grew up in a blessed home where my dad, even though my parents were divorced, my dad respected my mom and my mom respected my dad. Now we grew up pretty poor, but there was respect for it. And so I can make this joke and it doesn't affect me at all. But man, that's not the norm. There are a lot of people that grew up in abusive homes, and just like it, and I try to be more sensitive. And that's why I kept trying to preface it every time. Look, I'm not trying to be on a soapbox. I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. I'm just telling you where my mind is, because I want to have a better understanding of different cultures or different neighborhoods and the way my friends think, because it just makes you, if you're always willing to learn and become coachable, you're going to grow. And as a community, I do think that our America, if you want to talk about some bad things about America, here's one. We are so self-consumed that we're always trying to get the newest toy, the newest clothes. We're not willing to put our money. You talk about where we put our money. I put a lot of money, a lot. I mean, people ask me, why don't I live in a bigger house? Why don't I drive a newer car? It's because we give a lot of money to the community that is in New Orleans, in the inner city, that's helping those disenfranchised individuals that are living in the projects. Because my wife and I couldn't turn a blind eye to what we saw was injustice. But, like Eddie was saying, man, it's easy to sit here and talk about injustice, but what are people really, really doing about it? Because when you, and look, You want to know where someone's where their heart is, man, check out their checkbook and you'll figure out exactly what they care about.
Yep.
Really simple.
Hold on. To that point, people can write a check for anything and not give a damn about what's going on. So I don't like that logic of people saying, oh, well, just check the checkbook. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that's where their heart's at. They just give it because it looks good for some people. It looks good.
Money like me. I'm making sure I'm putting money with causes that I care about.
Well, I think it's really cool. I mean, it is a point, and Tamekius, if I may say this, listening to everybody's perspective, everybody has a different way of thinking, and we're not here to change anyone's thinking. We're just trying to educate each other and listen to each other and have these kind of conversations. But what I do hear that we do need to change, and I'm going to say it, is that we, as a country, we need to become more positive, and we need to find a way to be more positive. And
we need to restore trust. Our trust is broken in so many capacities at so many levels.
To our own culture, to our own race, to each other's race, to the government, to law enforcement, to corporations that are, I mean, you want to talk about screwing people. Let's just take a second to talk about corporations screwing communities.
Well, we have to listen to understand. Eddie said it way earlier. If we want real, it's listening to understand, not listening to make an argument against what that person has to say.
Right. And I think we need to get away a friend of mine today posted something. I'm going to try to pull it up. She put it on her Facebook, and I made the comment about it because I felt like, it's really important that we need to take the word but, B-U-T, out of people's sentences. This is something she wrote. She posted. Here's an example of how white privilege sounds. You keep saying it's horrible that an innocent black man was killed, but destroying property has to stop. Try saying it's horrible that property is being destroyed, but killing innocent black men has to stop. Again, both are right, but why do we have to have a divide? We just made two paragraphs or two sentences that could have been one. It's horrible that an innocent black man was killed, and destroying property has to stop. And I think that's where is really important as a country. We have to stop taking away from each other the meaning of our context, the meaning of the words. We all agree, no human being should be killed. Is that going to stop? No, we know that. It's not going to stop. Should it be happening in the hands of law enforcement? No. If it's not justified, no, I understand. Some people are going to say, well, Dave, what's justified, what's not? I'm not here to debate that. All I will tell you is that I would hope that anybody in a position where their life is potentially going to be taken, that you would want to defend yourself, which in whatever manner, capacity, you would do. If you decide you want, some people carry guns in the South. In California, we don't have an open carry law. But Arizona, if your life is going to be taken, doesn't matter what race you are, doesn't matter who the perpetrator is. If your life is going to be taken, I would hope you would want to defend your own life, whichever way you feel fit. Now, if you feel fit going into a gunfight with a knife, hey, I had one of my trainers. You laugh, Mike, but I'll tell you, one of my trainers in the police academy was, I want to say in his mid-50s, a badass. He can do things more with a knife than anybody could do with a gun. He's faster. He knows how to move better. He's always said he's better with a knife than he has a gun. But 99% of people are not that way. So the idea of bringing a gun to a gunfight, I call that justified. That's my perspective. Whether it be law enforcement, whether it be a fireman, whether it be Tamekius or Mike or me, we want to survive. But if we as a community don't stop saying but and start working with the and, because the and brings things together. The but is saying, hey, one person's statement is cool, but my statement's more important. Off my soapbox.
Well, I mean, I always tell people, everybody always has an opinion of, oh my God, well, he must have did something wrong because he's black. He must have been doing something wrong. First of all, it was a bullshit $20 forgery case supposedly that he had. Maybe he knew about it, maybe he didn't, but that's fucking irrelevant. The whole point is you use way too much excessive force on something like that. And then you have people, oh, well, you don't know the whole situation. Okay, so let's just put it like this. That is a black cop on a white guy, and that happened. How would you feel about that? And that white guy be your damn husband or your son. How do you feel about it now? And a lot of them are hush because, no, you don't think about it like that because it never sees or you never have to have it happen to you in any way, shape, or form. Now, there's over the last 5, 6, 7 years, I mean, we've seen countless of times where black men, black kids even, you can't even wear a damn hoodie in your own neighborhood to go to the store to get something to drink to come back home and live. That's ridiculous. Absolutely fucking ridiculous.
I agree with you, but can I just jump in for 1 second?
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I apologize. I want to bring the notion that anybody or the idea that if I saw a black cop beating a white officer, I would feel any different if it was a black guy with a white officer is not. I don't think that is where the problem is. I think the problem is that there's not enough speaking up on both sides. When you don't see in the media, and again, I go back to the media. The media is never going to sell when they put a black officer beating up a white guy. It's not going to sell. It's not what the community. That's not what people get engaged in. But when there's an African American, a white cop beating up a black guy, suddenly it's all over social media. Suddenly it's all over the media, and then it becomes this racial thing. And again, I use black or white because we're just calling the description of the person, not anything. Because like we have a really good friend, Jason. He's half black, half white. I make fun of him all the time. All the names I've called him. And we have a great time about it. But that to me, he brings up really good points about like living in both worlds. Like I just feel like if we were to go to the media and say, hey, listen, stop talking about color. Stop talking about color, period. Just say an innocent man was killed by a ruthless cop. And not show any pictures. Don't show any videos. Don't show anything. Do you think you'd have the same reaction? I don't think so. And that's where we as a community are falling into the traps of what the media wants us to buy. Because
once again, you're only, I guess, you're saying it, but these things have been happening before we had video cameras on our cell phones and other things like that. It's not new.
No. I know
it's not
that.
new at all. It's just that now is that starting to see it more, and it's like, oh damn, it's not right. But what do we do about it? And it goes back to the training. And you were a cop, Dave.
Yeah.
You were a cop, right? Yeah. Okay, so you was never taught to do that to anybody. I don't care what color it is. You weren't taught in your training to do that, right?
That's 100%.
So for a cop to do that, and whether it be a black guy, Hispanic, whatever, for him to do that makes absolutely no sense. Now it heightens because it is a white cop on a black guy who this white cop had 18 instances of issues with people of color in the past. So for him, it's you've been doing this shit all along. For other white cops are you really scared because that's a black male in the car in whatever perceived area? Because a lot of it comes down to if you're in a certain area, you're looked at a certain way. Now, I don't know much about the Ninth Ward, and Mike, you can tell us a lot more about the Ninth Ward, but I guarantee you if a cop sees a black guy in a damn Dodge Charger with black tinted windows riding around the Ninth Ward at 2 o'clock in the morning, he's probably going to think he's up to something negative. All right? That's just the first thing, right? Now, where I live, hell, it's 3 black people in my whole damn neighborhood of 30 houses. All right? That's it. My kids go to school. They're one of 20 kids in their school, high school, middle school. All right? It's predominantly white. All right? And I didn't do it just because I wanted to be out in the suburb. I did it because when they grow up, they're going to live in a world and a place where it's going to be a lot of white folks around. It's not going to be a black parade every damn day long where you're sitting around, with black people. It's not going to happen.
Right.
Okay. So for me, I wanted them to grow up and adapt to a world where you're going to come encounter with a lot of white people, and you need to know how to act when you're around them, because there's a lot of them that don't want you around them. Hell, my son, 11 years old, the first time I ever had to have a conversation with my son about race, he was dating a white girl in school. She broke up with him because her father didn't want her dating a black guy. 11 years old, 6th grade, I had to have that conversation with my son. A conversation that I didn't want to have until maybe hopefully a long time from then. But 11 fucking years old, racism in the damn school because her fucking sorry ass father didn't want her dating a black guy. Yeah. And that's the shit right there that it doesn't matter where I lived or whatever else. If there was a guy at home that didn't particularly care for black guys, it would happen no matter what. Right?
Yeah, 100%.
I want to propose a question because I don't know. I just got a thought with this.
Mm-hmm.
What would you, in certain Asian families, they don't want their kids dating anybody outside of that culture. I remember when I met Chelsea's dad. Chelsea made a comment to her dad. I can't remember what it was. And he looked at me and he said, "Well, hey, are you Jewish?" I said, "No, I'm not Jewish, but I'm married." He goes, "Oh, you got to be Jewish." So in the Jewish culture, they love to stay in the Jewish culture. Now, I will say that I don't think there's anything wrong with that mindset. I do think there is something wrong when you say, "I don't want you to date somebody because of their color." Look, I have had discussions. I got 3 girls. I got 3 blue-eyed, blonde-haired little girls. I got a blonde-haired son, blue-eyed. Guess what? I have told my parents, all of them, I don't care who they date. I don't care who they grow up to marry, as long as they have the same values. That's all I care about. You're right. That is a problem in society. I don't know why it's there. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, "Hey, I want my kids to marry a Jewish. I want them to, they're Jewish. I want them to marry somebody who's Jewish. Hey, my kids are Asian. I want them to stay." I don't think that's racism. I think it's just, I don't know what the thought process with it is. But as far as saying, "I don't want you to date somebody because of their color of their skin," that to me is much more prominent. And I think a lot of those people that say that, I guarantee, and I'm not agreeing with them. I guarantee if you call that girl's father and asked him, "Are you a racist?" he'd say no.
Of course not.
He'd say, "No, I'm not a racist. I just don't want my daughter dating a black guy." They can't see the difference. So there's this one level where I would put maybe my grandparents, my great grandparents, who were, they said, "Hey, we're not drinking out of the same water fountain. We're not going to the same bathrooms." And then there's the next level where maybe our parents are saying, "Hey, I don't care. That's stupid. Are you really worried about where your kid drinks out of a water fountain? But hey, you know what? I don't think I think you need to date somebody of your own race." And then there's our culture where we're like, our generation where we're like, "Man, I just don't care." There's a lot of bigger issues in the world than to whether or not my kid's going to date somebody of a different color.
Yeah. I mean, it's 100%, dude. And I think
change is happening. It's just,
I do. Some things have to change faster than other things. But we have to be understanding that. And I truly want to believe, and I mean, everybody has their own opinion. I wasn't alive in the 60s, I was born in 1980. So I want to believe that the 60s to, our decade now, the 2000s, there's been a lot of change. Is it enough change? No. Has there been changes? Yes. I still think, like you guys say, that there's some things that have not been dealt with. And they continue to be a systematic problem where it's constantly over and over. It doesn't matter what president's in the office, what governors protecting your state. It's almost like as we get older, we start to see that the older generation is really ruining our generation and lower.
I'm sorry, I just want to interrupt. Tamekius brought up a point. I will never have that conversation. I will never have to sit down with my 11-year-old kid and say, I'm sorry that someone doesn't like you because of the color of your skin. That's just a fact. So when people say there's certain things that you as a white guy won't have to go through, I never really even thought of that until you said it. I will never have to have that conversation. And that has nothing to do with about living in a bad neighborhood or hanging out with the wrong people. That's just pure stupidity. And unfortunately, yes, you have to have those conversations. The good thing is what I would hope you get to tell your children is that that's not the majority of people. And now look, that's my area. That's New Orleans. That might be San Francisco or New York. But I hope that you get to say, hey, you know what? That's an exception. It's not the norm. I hope we are moving towards things like that. Is that type of behavior is not the norm, because it's not where I live. And so,
well, in the grand scheme of things, for my kids, they understand that, although we're Black, they live a very different life than a lot of their counterparts, even whether they're white, Black, or whatever. I purposely do a lot of shit that a lot of people just don't do, or they can't do. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to do that with them, for them to experience those things. But it's so different from when I grew up. The only time I really only took a plane was when we went to Germany, and I was to go over there. And 4.5 years later, we took one coming back. That's it. We didn't have the money to be flying all around the country, staying in different cities and living in hotels and going shopping on Rodeo and, moving to California for 8 months and then coming back to Charlotte and, just kind of picking up where we left off. My mom didn't have that, and I never asked her for anything. I never asked her for anything above what she provided for me, because I already knew that it would be too much. So I never asked. Okay. But there's a lot of Black kids out there that will never have that opportunity to get on a plane to go to California or go down to Miami or go to New York. Hell, there's white kids that won't even be able to do that, But it's the fact that, I try to expose them to everything in life that is great about life. Okay. They've got white friends, they got Black friends, the few that there are out here. They've got Indian friends, it's a melting pot. And sometimes I sit back and I watch them, and I just kind of watch them interact with the different friends. And it's warming to the heart to know that there are some good kids out there and their parents are really raising them well, And my daughter, hell, all her friends are either mixed or white. That's it. All right. That's it. And for me, the first time one of her little white friends said, hey, we're going to take you to the beach, I was like, oh, hold on. They want to do what? Yeah, I know about that. And it was a searching in myself because, growing up, my mom and my grandparents were like, hey, you got to watch them, hey, you better not come home.
But to me, it's actually, we're laughing about it, but it's actually pretty cool. Like, just listening to all your guys' stories. Obviously, I don't have kids, so I don't understand. I know Eddie doesn't have any kids too, but
not yet.
That he knows of. He doesn't know if he has kids. And that was not because he's Latino, guys. Okay, calm down. All right. No, but to me, it brings up a cool thought that came into my head. And we talked about government. We talked about police. We talked about cities. We talked about the community. It really does start at home.
Yeah.
It really does start at home. And I think that, T, after, in the beginning of our conversation, as we're about to close this up a little bit, in the beginning of the conversation, I'm not going to lie, I had a hard time connecting with the way you were feeling, because I could feel the anger, and I'm sympathetic or empathetic. I don't know which one it is. My English is not the best, but anyways, I don't know the definition, but you get my point.
Okay.
As time went on and this conversation continued, I started to feel a certain way of like, okay, I'm starting to really understand this more. But I also saw you listening more. And you may not have noticed it, but I'm a person that I watch people's eyes and I watch how they react. You became maybe not understanding, but you're open to listening. And when you talked about your kids and the fact that you had to talk to your 11-year-old son about racial issues, like Mike said, I'll never have to do that ever. Unless I'm living in Lebanon, I'm never going to have to worry about that. Which I'm never going to live in Lebanon, even though they have the greatest food. It's just not,
Great day.
Yeah. My point is that going back to how it starts at home, if we as a generation, all we really need to do is start saying, let's change our thoughts. Let's teach our kids to think differently. Expose them. T, the best thing you said is you expose them. You chose to live wherever you live because you wanted them to be exposed. And not everybody has that opportunity. Your parents didn't have that opportunity. Your mom, your grandma, they didn't have that. You made a conscious decision working your ass off. Like I'm almost 100% sure you were never given anything handed to you because you basically explained the fact that, you got to travel because of your, the military part.
Pretty much.
But that opens up the thought process is that if you want change, you're going to get change by working hard. And everybody does have the right to the same opportunities. I'm not sitting here and saying that. But T, you didn't have the opportunities I had. And you're very successful because you had the desire, you had the will to live differently, to think differently, because you can't have these hard conversations. This conversation is not easy for anybody sitting at this table right now because we all have different perspectives, but being able to listen, and that's going to be the key word of this podcast is the listening. If we listen to each other, even if we don't agree with each other, if we listen to each other, show the respect, then by the time an hour and 36 minutes goes by, my perspective is now different. And I thank you for that. And that gives me hope that anybody who listens to this is going to realize it's not a 5-minute conversation.
No.
This is not a conversation. I understand what you're going through because fucktards, you guys don't understand. Right? Let's be real about it. I get into my fucking blacked out Tesla driving down the highway. I don't get stopped.
Damn. You're lucky, man. You're lucky.
Now I probably just jinx myself. But my point is, if we don't listen and we don't listen for a period of time in a healthy manner, nothing's going to change. And I go back to why I believe protesting is good, is that if we're listening to the protesters, things will change. But if we're only looking at the looters and the rioters, we're forgetting the protesters. And that's where the disconnect between the community and the media is. Proper protesting, the media is never going to show it. They're not showing it.
No.
And it doesn't sell. And we go back to this. We as a community, we need to shut the media down. We need to stop. And this is what social media is really good about. But the problem is that each person that's sitting on behind their phone has their own agenda. Like I drove down and looked at the protests in San Francisco, and I just sat and watched. And I wanted to see. And it was fine. Everything was good. Yeah, they're blocking roadways and stuff like that. Fine. Let's compromise. Block 2 lanes. Don't block all 4 lanes. Let people go to work. Let people go home because that's what they want to do. But if the media continues showing all the looting and all that, guess what? Everything that the community is doing in the name of George Floyd is getting thrown to the garbage.
All the empathy and sympathy and apathy, whatever you want to call it, Dave, all that is gone. I mean, because there was legitimate concern. And my community was upset over this sense. I mean, our pastor put out a video. He put out a video and called for the entire 5,000 members to stand but man, it's getting lost with the rioting, and it's sad. But
COVID-19's gone.
Well, again, the media is focusing on the small. We have to remember the media is going to focus on what is sensational, even if it's a small percentage. And the writing, even though it's a huge store that they may, or an entire street, I hope that it's the minority of what's going on, and
Right.
it's mostly healthy, peaceful protesting. But it's the media. It sucks because they're distracting people that probably would get engaged and want to stand and also help with the voice. They're distracting them.
Right.
So I got guys. So
last words. Let's go. Last words. Let's go around. Eddie, let's go with you first.
I think we've all basically been mentioning it. Part of this change, whether it's these true injustices that are happening, it starts with listening, but it's active listening. It's not just passively when it's convenient. It's active listening and actively being engaged with the community. And to be honest, it's about education. Educate yourselves, whether it's watching a documentary, reading a movie, not seeing one type of news outlet for media coverage. It's viewing it all. Educate yourself as much as possible.
See, I'm looking at that technology, guys. But yeah, woo boy! All right, T, you next, buddy.
For me, the biggest thing is change. And we all know change is inevitable. It's been decades and centuries of change, and while we've come a long way, we still got a long way to go. And I think a lot of people just have to change their mindset, change their thinking of what's really going on in the world. It's not just your little bubble. There's a lot of things going on outside your bubble that until you actually are exposed to it, you really don't understand it. And until that happens, and until people start really in their own mind, start to change their things and listen.
Right.
Yeah, they have to actively listen.
Yep.
Then we can start making progress.
Bridget, the last one.
I've said it a couple times. I think it's just a heart issue. Everybody needs to examine their heart. And if there's even a speck of hate, I'll call it hate, you need to recognize it. You need to examine your own heart. And you need to get rid of any type of hate, any type of judgment that you have on other people. So I think that's where true change comes from. And then talk about the experience. Be open to letting people know where your heart was, and where it is now, and how it got there.
Guys, first and foremost, thank you for doing this. I know this is a hard topic, and everybody's had their experiences, and but being able to sit and actively listen to each other, and I could speak for myself. An hour and 43 minutes later, I prospectively have new changes that I need to look at, and I appreciate everybody's opinion. I appreciate everybody's life. Nobody deserves to lose their life for whatever manner. It doesn't matter by anybody's hands. It doesn't matter. So thank you for all coming. I know we all have a life to do after an hour and 45 minutes. So thank you for joining me on the Blind Spot. I love you guys. Team Mike, Eddie, you guys are family. You guys always are. Talk to you guys later. Anybody who wants to follow us, find us on Instagram, social media, YouTube, all the crap, and you'll find us. And hope you enjoy it. Please leave your comments below. Love you guys. Be safe, and we will be chatting soon. Bye.